Tonight, we are going to discuss something very interesting. It is the deficiency of this concept that has kept people literally stunted at one position. It is the lack of the understanding that has shackled men, bright minds in poverty. Tonight, we attempt to answer the question. I'm sure majority are already fed up with this issue of finances, especially if you were recently introduced to the labor market. Majority has given up, majority have concluded it's impossible for me to get to the next level. I'm always going to be living paycheck to paycheck. It's impossible for me to get to the next step. Fear not, I come with glad tidings. Tonight, we attempt to answer the question, why is it, irregardless of how much I make, I never seem to be financially free? Sure, you might bask in the assumption the human wants are insatiable, or you can't save your way to wealth, which I agree with, by the way. Let's not get way ahead of ourselves. That's something we'll discuss later in the closing of this video. But the real answer is you do not understand the foundational principles of finances. So I'm going to give you two concepts today. At the grasp of this concept, you would notice a fundamental switch, not just in your mind, not just in your business. This is something you can apply now and see results. This has very little to do with consistency. Although like everything, consistency compounds. So you comparing yourself who begin today to someone who has been practicing for 5 years will be delusional. Yes, you would get more or better results consistently. But this is one of the very few concepts you can practice and see immediate results. Assets and liabilities. Majority do not understand truly the difference between assets and liabilities. A majority of you peasants have been programmed. You've been programmed to, this is what I call subliminal programming. So you've associated certain words, certain emotions with certain words. We won't go deeper. But majority of you, if I say consequence, it has negative connotations associated with that word. Why is that the case? It's most likely as a youngster, if you come late to school, you're going to face the consequence. As a result, you grew up believing consequences always mean bad, but consequences means results, either good or bad. If I say go to the gym and the consequences or the consequence will be larger arm, is that bad? Work as hard as possible and the consequence, you will be financially free. Is that bad? The point I'm trying to highlight is majority have negative connotations, have negativity associated with certain words. For instance, back to if you extrapolate it to the concept at hand, if I say assets, your mind naturally travels to rental properties, stocks. If I say liabilities, some don't even have an idea. At best, you think expenses, which is good, by the way. It shows you're not totally lost. It shows there is hope. There is an ember of hope. I'll give you my definition of assets and liabilities. Assets, in its simplest form, is what puts money into your pocket. Liability is what takes money out of your pocket. When you get your first paycheck, the natural tendency is to think a car, jewelry, wristwatch, anything that increases your status, anything that increases the perception of you to the external. Unfortunately, unfortunately, assets brings money into your pocket, but those liabilities takes money out of your pocket, and it doesn't stop in one purchase. Let me give you an example. Before I share this example, it's noteworthy to say every expenses or every expense comes with hidden expense. Very recently, there was this story I came across of a mother who gifted her child a $50,000 rug, of which stood out of place next to the hand-me-down furnitures, the wrong lightings. She felt compelled to take out loans to get new furniture, new dining in order to match the new gift. At the end of the day, she has spent next to the equivalent of the rug. The point I'm trying to highlight is when you spend your paycheck on getting a car, getting that jewelry, automatically there are expenses that comes with owning a car. The maintenance, gas, the security, all of the headaches associated with car. Not to talk about once you increase your lifestyle, it attracts a certain quality of people. Unfortunately, if you're not ready for that kind of life, you will be compelled to spend beyond your means. I hope you know once you go from a trekker to a car owner, it attracts a certain quality of people who own cars or who have equivalent lifestyle. So to you, spending $1,000 on a dinner table is a big deal. To them, not so much. The counter argument would be simply stand up and say, you know what, I can't afford this. I just bought this car for the sole purpose of buying, count me out. But chances are excellent someone who's willing to live beyond his means isn't able to make that statement. In fact, not only is he a timid individual, not only does he or she want to prove a point, but it's most likely he enjoy consuming upon his loss. So naturally, everybody has lost. Naturally, we want to live above our means. In fact, those who don't, it takes force. You need to deliberately consecrate yourself to live below your means. So the default is the inverse. So people look for all kinds of legal ways to live beyond their means. You find out that at the end of each month, you have a paycheck and you have no idea where everything is going to. I'll tell you the hedonistic lifestyle. I'll tell you the party, the various mechanics and finances poured into this newfound lifestyle. So assets is what puts money into your pocket. Liabilities is what takes money out of your pocket. Now, the counter argument would be, well, my clothes doesn't put money into my pocket. Are you saying I should be naked? It's a very interesting argument made by stupid people. the kind who are simpletons, who are very literal with life. I have a response prepared for dumbass like you. Sure, there are liabilities that helps facilitate assets. For instance, nobody is going to hire a naked person except you're in that line of work. But there are things I call inevitable assets. Those are assets that helps facilitate income getting. Those are liabilities that indirectly contribute into the building of assets. So for instance, if you want to get very nuanced with this concept, say you buy a book, you spend $5 on a book. It's not necessarily or it's not directly and literally putting money into your pocket, but from an indirect standpoint, you sustain the information which implemented gives you access to higher paycheck, access to higher opportunities. For instance, another example, if you spend $1,000 on a business seminar, that business seminar doesn't make a direct deposit in your bank account. It's the knowledge, the information that is now implemented in form of action that produces results. So yeah, there are inevitable liabilities that helps facilitate asset acquisition, understood and justified. However, if you want to go deeper down the rabbit hole for those fake it till you make it category, no, clothes is inevitable, but if you want to get luxury clothes, it's a different discourse. It's a different debate entirely. But the point I want to highlight, if there's anything you've learned throughout your time with me, is to focus on assets, then liabilities. Focus on what puts money into your pockets, then liabilities. Here's how I spend. Before I make any expenses, I look through my list of assets, identify which can pay for this liability. If there's no asset that can sponsor this liability, instantly I let it go. Now, I'm not talking about grouping the income received from my asset. If there's no one asset that can individually pay for this liability, it's most likely I'm not there. Let's keep trusting God for grace. Unfortunately, we live in this age of social media where people are pressured, pressured to sell a narrative, pressured for fame. Life is cause and effect. Life is action and reaction. Instead of chasing fame, chase impact. Instead of trying to sell the narrative that you are rich, be rich. So certain things you peasants chase are byproducts. Impact of fame is a byproduct of impact. When was the last time you saw Steve Jobs hanging around with hot models, in a yacht, driving a luxurious car, hiring an editor in an attempt to be constantly on your screen? Exactly. The man is past, yet he's been able to immortalize his impact. Why is that the case? He focused on something majority of you ignore. Answer this question. Please answer honestly. Say you get the fame. You watching me currently, you are famous. Every single person knows your name. What next? Do you sustain the value system to maintain that thing? Are you valuable enough for someone else to take time out of his day to listen? What do you have to offer aside showing a luxurious lifestyle, showing that you're living a hedonistic lifestyle? Aside that aspect, whether it's good or bad, is debatable. It's a different discourse in and of itself. But aside that aside that picture, what else do you have to offer? Nothing. Exactly. So focus on that before you focus on the consequence. I reiterate, humans enjoy consequence, not the action that precipitates the consequence. Every single action has consequence, and the consequences of those actions have been pre-programmed. If you walk to the summit of this building and you jump, the chances are excellent you would fall. So falling comes in honor to that decision, that action. Falling is the consequence to that action. Jump. Have you taken the action? No. How do I know the consequence? How are we certain of the consequence? Exactly. Why are you not falling? Because you've not engendered the action that causes or activates that consequence. Next time, when you're trying to be famous, what do you really need to do? When you're trying to build that business, when you're trying to promote XYZ, when you're trying to do something, what do you really need to do? Find the action behind the consequence you desire, and you'll be fine. So assets is something that puts money into your pocket. Liabilities takes money out of your pocket. And we discussed inevitable liabilities like your clothing, shelter, food. Going deeper down the rabbit hole for dumbasses who wants to be literal, and instead of understanding, they try more to point out holes in your discourse. We went further down the rabbit hole to say, yes, you can, those are inevitable liabilities, but if you decide to upscale those liabilities, instead of getting a plain t-shirt, you decide to get the luxury one. And there's nothing wrong in looking good. All I desire is you should be able to afford it. Being able to buy something is completely different from affording. Affording, you can't afford something if you can't buy three of it. Can you really buy three $5,000 shirts? It's a decision you need to make for yourself. If there's any advice I would give to any young man, is to understand that social media made average women celebrities and real men doubt their worth. So log out, block the noise, and find yourself. Any social media platform you're not earning from, be log out, be a producer, not just a consumer. In fact, adopting the mindset alone at the infancy of the action, you might not be receiving fruits, but the mindset you are a producer, not just a consumer, is fulfilling, is therapeutic. For the sake of time, as always, my friends, it's a pleasure speaking to you. I'll see you in the next one.